Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gallant Bodybuilding. Mountain. Sorry I haven't uploaded for a couple days, but we've had a lot of forest fires in the area. And in Hope, actually, where First Blood was filmed, you know, the Rambo movie, the first Rambo movie, Hope basically up in the mountains there is totally on fire, and that's only about a 30-minute drive from where I live. So the smoke was so bad, even going outside, you'd start to basically have lung issues and start feeling nausea and all that kind of stuff. So basically I said, screw it, I'm not gonna make any videos outside, you know, to avoid the weather. And I didn't even train in the garage for a few days either, because just breathing in the air and stuff was just so toxic. So there was not much point. But anyway, I'm back. And what I wanna talk about today is what's more important, how much weight you lift or how you lift it, right? Because that's the age-old question. It's almost like the chicken or the egg. And a lot of people are obsessed with one way, right? The how you lift it, or other people are like, you know, and some people call them the ego lifters, or how much weight you lift is all that matters, right? Now, what I've found is that it depends on the circumstance, which factor is more important. So what I'm going to say is you want to kind of combine both of these principles, meaning that you're lifting a weight that first and foremost doesn't destroy your joints, right? You're lifting the weight in a way that does not destroy your joints. You're using the proper technique for you, right? And secondly, you're gaining strength with that set technique, right? Progressive overload in some way, shape, or form, even if you're getting stronger with 25 reps, 20 reps, 30 reps, right? And then thirdly, you are using a technique that also keeps the tension on the muscles you want to hit. So like I've talked about before, if I bench press with powerlifter form, I could lift a lot more weight than if I bench press with bodybuilder form. If I'm using powerlifter form, what I'm trying to do is get a weight from point A to point B in the safest possible way, but also the most efficient way. So what's more efficient is not necessarily going to be stimulating the muscle you want to hit or stimulating more muscle, period, right? So if you take the point of least resistance between two areas, you can obviously lift more weight, right? But if you make a weight heavier than it really is, that's obviously going to be more stress on the muscle tissue, but you're not necessarily going to be able to lift as much weight. So the tough thing is that a lot of times you're going to want to get stronger, but you want to make sure that you're not cheating the weight up or changing your technique in order to get the weight up if you found that there's a certain technique that's really working for you efficiently. Now, sometimes both worlds collide. Sometimes what helps you lift more weight and what's efficient for you to stimulate certain muscle groups is pretty much the same thing. So my partial squat, you know, the low bar partial squat that I did most of my bodybuilding career, that was pretty much the best of both worlds. I was able to lift the most amount of weight with that, but also keep the most amount of stress on the legs. So I was finding what technique I could use a lot of weight with safely, but also I would cater the range of motion and the technique to make sure that I kept the stress on the legs where I wanted the stress instead of it just being distributed anywhere, right? So a lot of times people will only, you know, work with one factor or another in a lift, but not take in a lot of the factors that are contributors to how the exercise functions. So one example would be if somebody says, oh, I'm going to do low bar squats as opposed to high bar, but then they don't necessarily adjust how they push through the range of motion. They don't necessarily adjust their groove, like sitting their ass back farther or bringing their knees further forward, depending on which technique they're using, right? They don't necessarily adjust those parameters. They keep all that the same, and they just change one thing like high bar or low bar. You know, I've been coming up to the woods for a long time and I have not seen any monsters. The thing is, if you're not seeing monsters and you're in the woods, there's a good chance that you are the monster. So what I'm trying to say is that in order to find the right technique for you, you have to be willing to adjust many of the parameters, not just one parameter. Although maybe sometimes just adjusting one parameter is enough, but sometimes you may find you need to adjust many things. Like say, when you do low bar squat, maybe you need to do a narrower stance or a wider stance. I don't know which, in order for it to work better for you. And the same thing with a high bar squat. Maybe sometimes the stance you need to change around or your groove, right? So what I'm trying to say is sometimes there are lifts that you can keep the same and still access those muscle bellies you want to hit and use premium amounts of weights. And then there are other times you're going to find that you need to really make a conscious decision and say, I'm going to use a moderate weight, but I'm going to adjust my technique to make sure the tension is distributed on the muscle I want to hit. Holy shit. I can make some money here, look. An exercise stick.
No, no, no.
Wow. See, that this is, I tell you, just when you lose hope, there's another way to make money on YouTube right here. I got an exercise stick. Great deal, great deal. $3,000.99 for this exercise stick. Exclusive now, Natural Gallant Bodybuilding. Make sure that you send money quick.
There's OnlyFans.
Yeah, it's
OnlyFans exercise stick
then
here.
you'd be selling a different type of stick, I think. Yeah. So the big mistake a lot of people make, and I made this too when I was younger, is that I automatically assumed lighter weight was going to be a problem. I mean, I wasn't going to be looking stronger to other people in the gym, and at the same time, I was not really progressively overloading. I was not necessarily getting more weight on the bar for this perceived exercise. So that meant it was automatically useless. But that's not true, because if I'm bringing in 3 or 4 muscle groups in order to lift a weight, right? So say I'm bringing them all in evenly, and then if I use lighter weight and I adjust my technique and really use primarily one muscle, at least mostly, in order to lift the weight, one could say that I'm putting more stress on that target muscle, even though there's a lot less weight being lifted. And really there are 2 ways to look at this. One is you can look at muscular stimulation and systemic stimulation. And I think people get these mixed up, where they think, I want to lift as much weight as possible to stimulate the overall system. But if I only do that, what happens is that I may not be stimulating certain individual muscle groups, because stronger muscles or those grooves which allow me to lift heavier weight are basically stressing certain muscle groups, but maybe not other ones. And I would say I got locked more into thinking about systemic stimulation instead of muscular isolation in some cases. I think if I would have adjusted certain techniques, that I probably would have got even better muscularity in certain areas, and I would have been better off just ignoring the weight altogether and then holding on to some areas like the heavy squats and the heavy sort of bent over rows and that sort of thing. But I think there are certain muscle groups that would have benefited from some more muscular stimulation technique, even though I'm using lighter weight and a refined exercise technique or exercise groove. Right? So what I'm saying to you is really incorporate both these principles in your training. Don't throw one out or the other. You're going to find that you're going to be more dominant with one type of training than the other. Like maybe you're more like a heavyweight at all cost type guy, but once you start getting injured, you're going to probably change that philosophy pretty quick. Or you might be an isolation at any cost type of guy. And then you're going to notice that maybe some muscle groups are just not getting stimulated at all, even though you're perfectly isolating them, but they're getting so much isometric contraction or endurance type work, they're not necessarily getting the overall systemic boost that you get from just using heavy weights, right? So you want to blend these 2 principles as much as you can, and therefore you get that synergistic effect that I always talk about, which allows you to get more muscular growth. So if I was going to choose between the 2, I would say that how you lift the weight is even more important than how much weight you lift for the most part, because even if you're lifting lighter weights but you're using a perfect technique to isolate a certain muscle, that muscle's still getting challenged. It's still going to be heavyweight to that muscle itself. So if you're noticing there's certain muscle groups that are not developing, that means you probably have not found a way to isolate it perfectly for your body type. And again, different techniques are going to work for different people. You're going to find that maybe the technique that works for me might not be right for you. So you have to kind of play around with this and see exactly what may work, Say with bicep curls, maybe you need to stick the chest out more. Maybe you need to rotate the arms out more. Maybe you need to rotate the arms in. There's many, many ways that you can adjust the body and the positioning of the body in order to isolate a muscle. But if you're not doing it properly, there's definitely going to be a certain muscle group that's going to lag behind, right? So yeah, that's the art of bodybuilding, really. That's where getting to know your body and how it works is really an individual thing. And the more connection you have and more relationship you have with your own individual constitution and situation, the better results you're going to get. Mountain. So I hope this helps out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. You guys don't know this, but there's a lot of exercise rocks around here. So many exercise rocks. You guys don't have a clue. how much money I'm gonna make from all these exercise rocks here? I found a gold mine. Absolute gold mine of exercise rocks. Look at this. You guys have no clue, but how much money I'm gonna make. Look at this. Look at all these exercise rocks. This is unbelievable. Send $4,599 to naturalgallantbodybuilding.com and you can get one of these original exercise rocks that I found in the quarry here. $4,599. It's a total steal, honestly. I mean, it's still cheaper than gas, right? It's cheaper than gas. See, don't tell me that Natural Gallant Bodybuilding is not a charity organization. I don't do philanthropic work, okay? Total philanthropist. Practically giving rocks away. Giving them.